The music hit like a heartbeat through the walls of Club Azer, every bass drop shuddering through a man's chest. The sound wasn't just heard, it lived in her ribs, pulsed through her veins, made the glass in her hand tremble. She swirled the drink absently, watching the ice spin through the honey-colored liquid, catching flashes of neon in its slow orbit. Seoul's nightlife carried a flavor she hadn't tasted back in Atlanta, sleeker, more deliberate, like chaos dressed in couture. 6 months in the city had taught her that everything here was contradiction, elegant and wild, structured and untamed. She learned to move through it with the same poised confidence she'd brought across the ocean, though tonight, that confidence felt more like armor than mood. "Girl, could you try to look alive?" Mina's voice cut through the music like a melody sharpened by laughter. She leaned close, the scent of jasmine perfume slicing through the air, thick with liquor and sweat. "We're in the VIP section of the hottest club in Seoul, and you look like you're waiting for a transfer bus." Iman's lips twitched. "Maybe I am. These guys all blur together, different faces, same energy." She lifted a brow, her tone dry but laced with amusement. "They see a black woman and think they're exploring something exotic, but half of them wouldn't know what to do with me if I handed them instructions." Mina rolled her eyes, the kind of exasperated affection only a friend could manage. "Not every man in this city is a walking stereotype, you know." "Could have fooled me," Iman muttered, taking a slow sip. From their raised perch, she looked down at the sea of motion below, men in immaculate suits worth more than her monthly salary, women sculpted by highlighter and ambition. Seoul's elite, glittering beneath strobe lights. And yet, despite the spectacle, Iman felt detached, like she was watching through glass. "Handle you," Mina teased, echoing Iman's earlier words. "What are you, a wild horse?" Iman smiled, all teeth. "Feels like it sometimes. I just need someone who can keep up." The words hung in the air, confident, careless, until the hairs on the back of her neck rose. It wasn't the usual attention she was used to, the passing curiosity of strangers. This was different, intentional. She felt it before she saw it, a gaze heavy enough to draw her eyes across the room. And then she found him. He sat on the opposite side of the VIP section, framed by velvet ropes and a quiet circle of men who didn't look like bodyguards so much as trained predators. Even seated, his presence dominated the space. His face was all sharp lines and dangerous calm, a man who didn't need to speak to command attention. He didn't look away when their eyes met, didn't pretend it was accidental. He watched her openly, steadily, with a look that felt like a challenge. Mina followed her line of sight, and her tone shifted instantly, the playfulness gone. "Oh no, Iman, don't even think about it." Iman's eyes flicked toward her. "Think about what?" "That's Jin," Mina said, voice dropping low, barely audible over the music. "He owns this place. Actually, he owns half of Gangnam. You don't want to get involved with him." Iman arched an eyebrow, intrigued despite herself. "Why not?" Mina leaned closer, perfume and fear mixing in the air. "Because he's not like the others. He's dangerous, Iman. The kind of dangerous that doesn't come with warning signs, just consequences." A thrill ran through Iman, uninvited and unstoppable. It was the same instinct that had gotten her into trouble since she was old enough to chase what burned. Her mother used to call it her fatal flaw, reaching for fire, then acting surprised when it scorched her. Iman turned back toward the man across the club. Jin hadn't moved, hadn't blinked. He was still watching her like he already knew she'd look back. And maybe that was the first mistake she made that night. Or the first thing she'd gotten right in months. The air in Club Azer seemed to shift, thickening around her the moment he stood. She noticed it first in the crowd, a subtle ripple, people turning instinctively as though gravity had tilted toward him. Jin moved through the haze of light and bodies with an ease that came from being obeyed without question. The music didn't lower, but somehow everything else did, conversations, laughter, movement, like the city itself held its breath. Iman felt Mina's hand tighten around her wrist. "Don't," Mina hissed, eyes wide. "He's coming over here." Iman almost laughed. "You're being dramatic." "Not dramatic enough," Mina snapped, though her voice trembled. I'm serious, Iman, that man is. Dangerous, I know, Iman said, finishing for her, gaze locked on his approaching figure. You said that already. He stopped in front of their booth. Up close, he was worse, or better, depending on how you measured trouble. His suit was midnight black, tailored with precision that suggested it hadn't been bought so much as constructed for him. The air around him smelled faintly of something clean and expensive, like smoke and rain on metal. You look disappointed, he said, his English smooth, the faintest trace of an accent threading through. Bored, even here in my club. Iman tilted her head. Your club. He smiled, a slow, deliberate curve that didn't quite reach his eyes. Should I be impressed? Most people are. I'm not most people. His gaze flicked over her face, not the crude kind of stare she was used to, but an assessment curious, measured, and entirely unashamed. No, he murmured. You're definitely not. Mina, he added, without looking away from Iman, you've been keeping interesting company. Mina managed a tight nod, words catching somewhere between fear and respect. Just a friend, Jin. Good, he said simply, then gestured toward the empty seat beside Iman. May I? Mina started to protest, but Iman's curiosity had already drowned out her caution. She nodded once. Jin slid into the booth with the quiet grace of someone who never needed to rush. Even seated, his presence filled the space, calm, contained, but humming with something volatile underneath. So, he said, voice low enough to cut through the music without needing volume. What brings you to Seoul? Work, teaching English. He nodded as though he'd already known. 6 months now. Iman's eyes narrowed. How do you know that? He didn't flinch. I make it my business to know things, especially about interesting people who spend their evenings in my VIP lounge pretending they're not impressed. She raised an eyebrow. There's that word again. You own a lot of things, Jin. Everything worth owning. Iman laughed, a rich, genuine sound that startled both of them. Is that your line? Because it's terrible. Something flickered across his face, not offense but amusement. You're laughing at me. Completely. That's the most arrogant thing I've heard all week, and I teach teenagers who think they're philosophers. For a heartbeat, the mask slipped. He leaned back, studying her with something like respect. Then tell me, he said, what would it take to impress you? Iman met his gaze head-on. More than money and power. I've dated both, and none of it lasted. And yet here you are, he countered, in the club of a man who has both. Maybe I'm just bored, she shot back, the challenge sliding into her voice before she could stop it. His smile deepened, something sharper hiding underneath. Or maybe you're testing me. Maybe. The air between them tightened, charged like the moment before lightning strikes. Tell me, he murmured, you think men like me can't satisfy women like you. She smirked, leaning closer just enough to blur the edge of danger and desire. No, I think men like you assume they can. The words hit, sharp and deliberate. Around them, the club's pulse faded until it felt like they were alone, predator and prey, though neither quite knew which was which. Jin's expression didn't shift, but his eyes darkened. That's quite a statement. It's a fact, Iman said. Men with power think it's the same as substance. You probably have women lining up for your attention, but I doubt one of them has ever walked away satisfied. Mina made a quiet, strangled sound beside her. Iman. But Iman didn't look away, didn't blink. She was locked in now. Jin's lips parted, a dangerous kind of calm in his tone. Then I'll make you a deal. She arched a brow. A deal. 1 week, he said. 7 days to prove you wrong. Prove me wrong about what? That I can satisfy you, he said simply, the words landing like a promise and a threat all at once. For a second, Iman forgot how to breathe. The logic of the world tilted, every sensible thought replaced by adrenaline. And if you can't, she asked, voice steady despite the heat curling in her chest. Then I'll admit it, publicly, if you want. I'll stand on this bar and declare that Iman, the American teacher, was more than the great Jin could handle. She laughed, incredulous, electric. And if you can. Then you admit I'm not like the rest. His gaze didn't waver. And you give me the chance to show you just how different I am. It was reckless, stupid, the kind of thing her mother would have prayed against. But a man had never been one to ignore a spark once she smelled smoke. 1 week, she said finally, extending her hand. But you're going to lose. Jin's hand closed around hers, warm, sure, deliberate. We'll see. The moment their palms met, a shiver ran down her spine, not fear but recognition. And deep down, a man knew something irreversible had just begun. The following evening arrived like a secret whispered too close. Seoul's air carried that late autumn chill, the kind that slipped beneath coats and made every exhale visible. A man stood by her apartment window, half-dressed and half-decided, staring down at the city's grid of lights. She told herself she wasn't waiting for him. But her hair was done, her lipstick fresh, and she'd checked the mirror too many times to lie convincingly. A black car appeared on the street below, long, silent, tinted. No message, no call, just the hum of an engine that knew where to stop. Her phone buzzed once, downstairs. No greeting, no name, just that. And still she went. When she opened the door, Jin was leaning against the car, coat draped over his shoulders like a second skin. He didn't smile, but something flickered in his expression, approval, maybe curiosity. You're punctual, he said. You're dramatic, she countered. Guilty. He opened the car door with an old-world kind of courtesy that didn't match his reputation. She slid in, pretending not to notice the way his cologne, subtle smoke, something woody, filled the space between them. They drove in silence at first. The city lights faded behind them, replaced by the darker sprawl of the mountains outside Seoul. A man watched the skyline disappear in the side mirror. You're not taking me to some secret warehouse, are you? She asked finally. Because I didn't pack for kidnapping. Jin's laugh was quiet, unexpected. You think I'd go to that much trouble? With your ego, absolutely. Fair, he paused. You'll see soon enough. The car turned off the main road, winding up a narrow path lined with pines. Lanterns flickered in the distance. When they stopped, a man stepped out into silence so complete it felt like sound had been turned off. Before them stood an old Buddhist temple, weathered but immaculate, its wooden beams glowing faintly under the moonlight. She turned to him. This is not what I expected. That's the point, he said. You think I'm all neon and noise. Aren't you? His gaze softened. Not always. They walked through the temple grounds, gravel crunching beneath their shoes, incense curling from unseen altars. He greeted an elderly woman sweeping the steps with a bow so respectful it startled a man. Who's that? She asked. My grandmother, he said simply. A man blinked. Your grandmother lives here. She runs the temple, has since my father died. Something shifted in his voice, the steel softening, replaced by something quieter. He guided her to a wooden bench overlooking a koi pond. The water reflected them both, the night turning their faces into silhouettes. Why bring me here? She asked finally. He was silent for a moment. Then, because I wanted you to see I'm not just what people whisper. She studied him. And what do they whisper? That I'm dangerous, he said, meeting her eyes. That I built an empire from blood and concrete, that I ruin the things I touch. Are they wrong? He didn't answer immediately, not completely. A man leaned back, watching the koi move lazily beneath the surface. That's not an answer. It's the only honest one I have, he said. The wind shifted, carrying the faint chime of prayer bells. A man felt something tighten in her chest, not fear, but empathy, sharp and inconvenient. He turned his head toward her, studying her profile. Most people don't ask me questions like that. Most people probably don't expect answers, she replied. He smiled then, the first real one she'd seen from him. It softened the edges of his face, made him look startlingly human. I like that, he said quietly. You don't treat me like a story someone told you. Maybe because I don't believe in stories, she said. People use them to make sense of things they don't understand. Do you understand me then? Not yet, she admitted, but I'm curious. He looked away, exhaling through his nose as if her honesty disarmed him. Curiosity, he murmured. That's how all dangerous things begin. They stayed there until the night thickened. No music, no crowd, just two strangers orbiting something unnamed. When the car brought her home hours later, a man hesitated before stepping out. He leaned toward her slightly, voice low. 1 week, he reminded her. She met his eyes. You've got 6 days left. As the car pulled away, she realized her hands were trembling, not from fear, but from the quiet certainty that she was already in too deep. 2 days passed before she heard from him again. Just when a man had convinced herself the silence meant he'd lost interest, her phone lit up with a short message. Be ready at 8, dress simply. J. No explanation, no emoji. Still, she found herself standing by her door at exactly 7:59, a coat draped over her arm and her heart racing for reasons she didn't want to name. This time, when the car door opened, there was no driver, only Jin. He looked different without the armor of a suit. A dark sweater, rolled sleeves, a faint scar visible just below his wrist. The kind of detail that made him look more real and somehow more dangerous. Where are we going? She asked. He glanced at her, then at the road ahead. You said you wanted to see who I am. I'm showing you. The drive took them through narrow alleys and out toward the industrial edge of the city. Places a man had never seen, the kind that didn't make it into travel blogs or weekend itineraries. They stopped outside a warehouse lit by a single flickering bulb. Music from a nearby bar bled through the cold air, distorted and lonely. A man hesitated. Jin, what is this? He didn't answer immediately, only nodded for her to follow. Inside, the warehouse was almost empty, a few men talking quietly, others stacking crates. The smell of metal and gasoline clung to the walls. The men stopped when they saw him. Their posture shifted instantly, a mix of deference and unease. A man could feel it, the weight of his authority, how the room adjusted itself to his presence. He spoke to them in Korean, low, fast, decisive. She couldn't understand the words, but she understood the tone. Power, precision, the kind of control that didn't need volume to command. When he finished, the men nodded and returned to work. Jin turned back to her, face unreadable. So, she said softly, this is what people mean when they say you're dangerous. His jaw flexed. People love their myths. But myths start somewhere, she replied. He looked at her for a long moment, as if debating whether to let her in or send her away. Finally, he spoke. My father built this, the business, the reputation. When he died, I took what was left, the good, the ugly, all of it. I didn't get to choose. A man folded her arms. And now? Now I try to make something cleaner from the mess I inherited. That's what the temple was, wasn't it? She said quietly. Your attempt at balance. For the first time, something flickered in his eyes, surprise, maybe even respect. You see more than most. Maybe because I'm not afraid to look, she said. He stepped closer then, until the scent of his cologne and the cold metal of the warehouse blurred together. You should be, he murmured. A man met his gaze without flinching. If I were, I wouldn't be here. Silence stretched between them, not awkward, but heavy with things neither dared to say. Then one of the men called for Jin from across the floor. He responded in Korean, voice clipped, before turning back to her. I have to handle something, he said. Wait here. When he walked away, she saw it, the way the others looked at him, not as a friend, not even as a leader, but as something larger, untouchable. And yet, when he glanced back at her, just once, before disappearing through a steel door, there was something unmistakably human in that look. An hour later, when he drove her home, neither spoke. The city lights slid across their faces like passing ghosts. Outside her apartment, he finally broke the silence. You shouldn't come to places like that, he said quietly. You don't belong there. A man's hand hovered on the door handle. Then why did you bring me? Because I wanted you to see what following me looks like, he said, so you'd have a choice before it's too late. She looked at him for a long time, searching for the man she'd met at the temple, the one who bowed to his grandmother, who smiled when she asked too many questions. Too late for what? She asked. For walking away, he said simply. The words hung in the cold air long after she'd gone inside. And as she leaned against her door, heartbeat thrumming in her ears, a man realized the truth. He wasn't warning her away. He was warning himself. Rain arrived before dawn. By the time evening fell, Seoul shimmered beneath it, a city of glass and reflection. A man stood under the awning of a small cafe near the river, watching people hurry past with umbrellas blooming like dark flowers. Jin was late. She told herself she didn't care, that she'd leave if he didn't appear in 5 minutes. She was down to her last minute when his shadow crossed the wet pavement. He didn't apologize. He never did. But the way he looked at her, slow, searching, made it impossible to stay angry. You're soaked, she said, stepping aside as he joined her beneath the awning. I needed the rain, he answered. Reminds me I'm still human. She laughed softly. You make it sound like you forget. Sometimes I do. They began to walk along the riverfront. The rain had softened to mist, the city lights blurring in the water below. Neither spoke for a while. When they finally stopped, it was on the footbridge that cut across the hand like a silver scar. You wanted honesty, he said. So here it is, I hurt people. A man looked at him carefully. You mean your business? I mean what it takes to keep it alive. He turned toward her, the reflected lights catching the tension in his jaw. I built something powerful out of what my father left, but power doesn't come clean. And I know one day everything I've done will find its way back to me. Then why keep doing it? She asked. Because it's the only world I know, he paused, until you. The words landed between them, like heat breaking through fog. A man wanted to step back, but something in his voice, quiet, almost fragile, kept her still. You don't know me, Jin. I know the way you look at people and see through them, he said. I know you hate being bored because you confuse stillness with emptiness. And I know you came to Seoul running from something you haven't named yet. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. He wasn't wrong. You think you see me, she said finally, but you only see the parts that fit your story. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. Then tell me the rest. I don't owe you that. No, he agreed, but you want to. The rain thickened again, soft and cold against her face. She could smell his cologne through it, smoke, cedar, something unfamiliar that reminded her of long nights and quiet danger. This is what you do, she said. You pull people in until they forget they can walk away. His eyes met hers, steady and dark, and you came anyway. A man's chest tightened, because I wanted to see if the fire was real. Is it? She hesitated, then quietly, yes. For a moment, neither moved. The city roared around them, but the space between their voices felt private, carved out of the noise. He reached up, fingers brushing a strand of wet hair from her cheek, not possessive, just deliberate, like he was testing what closeness meant. Fire can warm, he said, or destroy. Maybe both, she replied. Jin smiled faint, resigned. That's what scares me. Losing control. Losing you to it. And for the first time, a man saw something she hadn't expected in him, fear, that had nothing to do with power. They stood like that until the rain eased and the city blurred back into motion. Whatever passed between them wasn't peace or promise. It was a kind of understanding that the line between danger and love had vanished, and neither of them could redraw it now. The night arrived soft and suffocating, the city below a lattice of lights and shadows. A man stood on Jin's rooftop, the wind tugging at her hair, the scent of the city sharp beneath the faint hum of distant traffic. 7 days, 7 nights, enough to change everything, yet not nearly enough to understand it all. Jin appeared behind her without a sound, his presence folding into hers like the dark had always belonged there. He didn't speak at first, only watched the way she breathed in the night, the way her shoulders carried both defiance and exhaustion. "You were right," she said finally, voice low, almost swallowed by the wind. He tilted his head, studying her. "About what?" "About me. About needing someone who could match me, not change me. About fire, about everything." For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat of him, close enough that every instinct in her told her to step back, and every other told her to stay. "So," he said quietly, "you win the bet." "Yes," she admitted, her voice trembling despite herself. "But it doesn't matter, because I didn't just win. I found something I didn't know I was looking for." He didn't smile, not fully, but something softened in his eyes, a vulnerability she hadn't seen before. "And what's that?" "You," she said. "All of it, even the parts you think I can't handle." The wind picked up, tugging at her coat and sending loose strands of hair across her face. He reached up, brushing them aside with deliberate gentleness. "You're falling," he said. "I am," she whispered, almost afraid to speak it aloud. "And I don't care." "You shouldn't," he said softly. "Not in this world." "I don't want to be safe anymore," she replied. "I want whatever this is." His eyes darkened with a mixture of relief and something dangerous. Pride, perhaps, or the thrill of knowing he wasn't the only one standing at the edge of fire. He lowered his forehead to hers, letting the city hum beneath them, letting the night seal the confession that words could never contain. "So now," she asked, voice shaking with the weight of what she'd just admitted. "Now," he said, breathing mingling with hers, "we see how far the fire can take us." And for the first time in months, maybe years, Iman felt entirely alive. The wind whipped around them, carrying away the old rules, the doubts, the safe choices she had clung to in soul. The city was a blur of lights and shadows, but up here on this rooftop, there was only the two of them. She smiled through the tension, through the fear, through the truth of what she had done. She had bet everything on a man who was danger and refuge all at once. She had chosen the fire. And somehow, she knew she wasn't going to regret it. The morning after the seventh night arrived quietly, almost reluctantly, over Seoul. Iman sat at her small apartment window, watching the city stretch beneath her like a living mosaic of light and shadow. The streets that had once seemed foreign now felt alive, familiar, dangerous in ways that thrilled rather than frightened her. Her phone buzzed, a message from Jin. "Coffee, 10:00, J." She smiled, realizing she hadn't stopped thinking about him, about everything. About the week of challenges, confessions, and quiet battles of wit. About how the fire had burned hotter than she expected, and yet she was still standing, still wanting more. When she arrived at the cafe, Jin was already there, seated at a corner table, the city light catching the sharp angles of his face. He looked less like the empire builder she had met and more like someone who could simply exist, human, unguarded. "You made it," he said, voice calm, steady. "Didn't think I'd miss this," she replied, sliding into the seat across from him. He studied her for a moment, then nodded slightly. "No, I suppose not." The conversation began casually, coffee, the mundane rhythm of life, but beneath it ran the current of the week they had shared. Words, glances, unspoken agreements. Each smile, each subtle pause, a thread in the delicate web they were weaving together. "I never thought a week could change so much," she said finally, stirring her coffee. "I came here thinking I was just playing a game." He leaned back, studying her with a quiet intensity. "It's never just a game. You learn quickly." "Did I win?" she asked, teasing, though her pulse quickened at the weight of the answer. He smirked slightly. "Depends on what you mean by winning." "You showed me you could satisfy me," she said, meeting his gaze. "You've proven yourself beyond the bet." "And you," he asked softly, "do you know what you proved to me?" "I think I do," she whispered, almost afraid to speak it aloud. "That I can trust someone like you, that danger doesn't always mean harm, that fire can be shared, not feared." He reached across the table, covering her hand with his own. The contact was simple, grounding, intimate in a way that made the room feel smaller, warmer. "Then maybe the bet isn't over," he said quietly. Maybe it was just the beginning. Iman's lips curved into a smile, genuine and unguarded. Then let's see where it goes. Outside, the city carried on neon reflections on wet pavement, the distant hum of traffic, life moving relentlessly forward. But inside that small cafe, the world had narrowed to two people, two hearts learning to navigate the fire they had chosen to walk into together. She realized, finally, that the danger she had chased was nothing compared to the risk of opening herself fully, and that the reward might just be worth it. For the first time since arriving in Seoul, she felt completely alive, and she knew that, with him, there was no turning back. The city could wait. She had found her fire,